Welcome to Ray Moore Live. Join us as we discuss current events, history, apologetics, and more. We're making education, families, and America great again. Here's Ray.
Hey, well, welcome to Ray Moore Live. It's August 13, and we're celebrating still our new organization called Christian Education Initiative. It's a new umbrella organization. It's an alliance or network or coalition of 20 member groups that basically are similar to the Exodus Mandate Project. Similar, but maybe nuanced differently, that have maybe a different focus or different interests. We have, with the Exodus Mandate, our approach is to try to extract and get Christian children out of public schools into Christian schooling or homeschooling. And that's the main thing that we do. And all of our activities really revolve around that. And so we're promoting K-12 Christian education as our main emphasis. And of course, there's a lot of things that revolve around that. We just had a conference. We organized the Christian Education Initiative officially on March 13th and published our news release. And so we had a 2-day event in Virginia just to kind of get together, to get to know one another, and to plan, make some plans, long-term plans, so that for working together. We're new, and some of our organizations, member organizations, are not new. They've been around for years. We're 22 years old. That is officially with the Exodus Mandate. We have other groups that have been in existence 50 years. And we're going to interview one of their leaders in a few minutes. But we've gotten together officially and formed an alliance. Every organization is going to keep their same mission statement. Maybe we could go to christedu.org. That's our webpage, and just post the mission statement briefly. christedu.org. And let's take a look at our mission statement. All right. Put that up if you can get it. Is it up? All right, good. Okay. Well, the Christian Education Initiative, and we sometimes refer to ourselves briefly as CEI, is a Bible-based evangelical alliance of member organizations whose purpose is to advance the kingdom of God by growing Christian education, thus helping fulfill the Great Commission, Matthew 28:18-20, and the cultural mandate, Genesis 1:28-29. So that's basically what we do. It's very simplified and very clear. We are a Christian ministry in the tradition of the evangelical Christian faith. And we're Bible-based, so we hope to, make that very clear that we want to emphasize Scripture and emphasize Christ as our Lord and Savior. So that's what we've done, and we have 6 objectives that go along with this mission statement. And we'll actually hopefully review these as we go along today. Well, we had a meeting, and we had about 30 in attendance, about 12 of our members, and 15 or so non-members of similar organizations or ministries that fundamentally agree with us. And we invited them in to present what we're doing, and hopefully they may, participate more with us in the future. So it was a very, very good conference, and we're not publicizing it much because we're so new, and we have some funding issues, as many new organizations do. we did create a little ad, a 4-minute ad, and I'm going to ask Jared to run that in a second or so. But it basically explains what I just told you, and we like it. It's new. We haven't shown it to many people. You might be one of the first groups that's seen this ad, and so we've got to start publicizing what we're doing and making it known. So let's run the ad right now. It's about 4.5 minutes long.
They have 85% or more of our children sitting for 5 days a week in a government school, receiving massive doses of propaganda, indoctrination, brainwashing. And I mean, they've had 100 years of scientific, psychological experiments to perfect this. And so what we concluded is that over the long run, all these battles that we care about, and I don't care what your issue is, viewer, maybe you're all about gun rights, maybe you want to stop abortion, maybe you want to lower taxes, fight socialism, preserve our national sovereignty and our independence, protect our free speech, all of these issues that unite Americans, that really define Americans. We're going to lose on every single one if current trajectories continue. So what we do in this special report, we expose it all, the sexualization of the children, the indoctrination, the poor academics, the deliberate dumbing down of the children, and this can all be documented. I encourage people to get a copy of this. And then maybe even more importantly, we show parents what they can do about it. We have the ultimate trump card here, no pun intended, and that is our ability, our established right in all 50 states to opt out of this system.
Okay, I think it's you completed it. That I believe it's over now, and so that's our first ad. And if you like that and you can use it in your own circle, we can actually email it to you, and hope you will. Now we are going to emphasize CEI, or the Christian Education Initiative, is going to function kind of like an umbrella organization or coordinating agency, and I'm the chairman. And so we're operating out of our regular Exodus Mandate Frontline Ministries office. So we have really double duty, and our funding is kind of weak. So again, this will be a good time for you to consider making a donation to the ministry, because we're launching some new programs. And again, as I said, our funding support base is weak. We need new donors, and we need some new substantial donors. So any way you could help us on that, we'd be very grateful right now. This is an important time for us. So the CEI, the Christian Education Initiative, is going to function more as a coordinating agent. It's brand spanking new, I guess now maybe 6 months old, with very little publicity. We're just sort of setting up right now. Today, with the rest of my time, however, I want to go back to the first interview I did back in March with Dr. Max Lyons. He's one of the main ones. I'm the chairman, and Dr. Max Lyons and Dan Smithwick with the Nehemiah Institute function as co-chairs. And we have 20 members, and we do have a prospect of probably very quickly bringing in a dozen or more members over the next few months. But the office infrastructure is sort of weak right now, and we having a hard time managing too much more work, and as I know you understand. So we're going to interview Max Lyons. It's actually a previous interview I did, and this will give you more details and elaboration about what the Christian Education Initiative is hoping to accomplish by looking at one of our member groups. That's the Foundation for American Christian Education, sometimes known as the Principle Approach Education. And Max is a very prominent part of that organization. They're about 50 years old, believe it or not. They've been around a long time and operate in dozen states or so. And they do have 150 schools in the country of Brazil. Okay, we'll go ahead and rotate over to the previous interview now, and thank you for being with us today. And we're going to continue Ray Moore Live next week.
History, apologetics, and more. We're making education, families, and America great again. Here's Ray.
Well, welcome to Ray Moore Live. Glad to be with you again, and this sunny day on the 19th of March. I guess I've been off for the last 2 weeks, out of town, and we had reran some old programs that were favorites of mine, and I hope they were acceptable. Some of them were so far back that perhaps you hadn't seen them before, so it was new to you. We've got a body of work now after 9 months. We've got a lot of programs, and so I guess I can duck out every now and then and run an old program and know that the program is carrying on. And so thanks to Jared Heath as our producer for being able to do that and for keeping archives back for 9 months. Today, however, we're going to introduce a new thing that we've done. And it's called, this program, I guess, is entitled Introducing the New Christian Education Initiative. And we're going to be talking about that. We actually publicly launched that on the 13th of March. And it's brand spanking new, but we've been actually working on it for months. And we have one guest this morning, Dr. Max Lyons, with the Foundation for American Christian Education. And he's on, and we're going to be talking to him about his program and also the Alliance. So that's what we're about this morning. Let me say a little bit about the Alliance. For decades, some of us have been laboring in the vineyard of Christian education, trying to grow Christian schools and homeschooling, trying to get churches, families, and pastors to withdraw their children from the state-sponsored public education system and go exclusively into Christ-centered, Bible-based Christian education. That's been the mission of the Exodus Mandate really since 1997. I've been operating for 22 years. Foundation for American Christian Education has been operating even longer than that. But we came together in August in Appomattox, Virginia at one of our conferences. And this had been building for a long time. It had been discussed for several years to form some kind of a coalition or alliance. We struggled for months to come up with a name for it, where we could band together and collaborate because we had so many shared agenda items and concerns. And so we voted, I think it was August 19th. There were about a dozen people in the room. Max and his wife, Marjorie, were two of them. My wife, Gail, and I were there. And we had decided to go ahead and form an alliance, and now we named it a few months ago called the Christian Education Initiative. It's strictly about Christian education. Most of our groups have worked in K-12 Christian education, but we decided, since we think all education should be Christ-centered and Bible-based, that we were going to leave open higher education, even though most of us at this time don't address that. We address K-12. And so we met and voted to go forward, and yours truly was, I guess, chosen as the chairman. I sort of volunteered for it, but everybody seemed to think it was a good idea. And I'm the chairman of this effort, and we've got some substantial groups that are working with us. Just so happy that this has happened. So let's go ahead and put the news release up first, Jared. I think you have that there. All right. So, okay, here we go. Put the news release up. And you can see it's dated March 13th. So we released it publicly on March 13th. So really only about a week old publicly. And we had 12 at the initial meeting in August, but now we have 18 members, and here you can see some of them. And some were known in the Christian education arena, and particularly Foundation for American Christian Education. That's Dr. Carol Adams and Dr. Max Lyons. And Carol is a member, but Max sort of represents the foundation in most of our meetings and in our collaborations together. Okay, let's see. We have Jay Jacino. We've had him on the program. He's written a book called Truth is Fallen in the Street. And his argument is that the teachers in public school, that is Christian teachers, can't really use a strictly Christian methodology of pedagogy. And maybe they should consider leaving since they're so restricted and harassed and coerced by the state model, and come over into the Christian education arena and help in that area. We have the Providence Foundation, which is a wonderful group. They've worked in dozens of foreign countries teaching America's Christian heritage and the Christian foundation principles of our nation. Stephen McDowell has written some wonderful books. I think one is I've used in our homeschool experience called America's Providential History. If you haven't read that or seen that, you've missed out. Kevin Novak, our resident attorney, has written a book called Deconstructing the Coliseum. The book is called Abolition, but his organization is Deconstructing the Coliseum. I'm probably not going to be able to mention everybody because we've got 18 members, and we really want to spend a lot of time talking to Max about his program. Paul and Gina Schwartz, the Old Schoolhouse magazine, which is the largest explicit Christian homeschool magazine in the nation. Okay, let's go down to the mission statement. All right, here we go. And any way to highlight that, Jared, on the internet? It's right the one under that, next one down, right there. Christian Education Initiative. There we go. We labored and struggled and debated and prayed over this mission statement. We wanted to get that right. If you have the wrong mission statement, then you never get a good start. So we are a Bible-based evangelical alliance of member organizations whose purpose is to advance the kingdom of God by growing Christian education, thus fulfilling the Great Commission and the cultural mandate. Very broad, but this is what we're trying to do, and we believe we can do it. All right, let's go to the back page and look at some of our broad objectives. Go scroll. There we go. All right, right there. The Christian Education Initiative has 6 broad objectives. First is to facilitate a dramatic increase in the number of children exiting government schools and entering into Christian education for Christian schooling and homeschool co-ops and other Christian education models. So we're strictly about Christian education. We're not attempting, point 2, to reform the unbiblical, unconstitutional government school model. Many people are laboring, conservatives and Christians trying to reform public education. We don't think it can be done. It's a socialistic model, and it shouldn't really exist in its current form. So we're not trying to fix it. We're not trying to reform it. We're trying to basically repeal it or privatize it and move strictly into biblical Christian education for all churches and children. Okay, there we go. That already goes to point 3. I won't mention that again. We're going to be in number 4 about a strict biblical philosophy, curriculum, and methodology. And this is very important because a lot of Christian schools use often secular or non-Christian methodology. And we think that not only do we have a content that must be Christ-centered and Bible-based, but how we teach is also has a biblical model as well. 5, to encourage, promote, to train parents, pastors, teachers, and board members in biblical philosophy, curriculum, and methodology of education. So we're going to be really looking a lot at the church and how to buck up pastors and churches to get behind this effort. There's such a lag in our churches. They just don't see it in many cases. And then finally, to promote, help parents with limited financial means to be able to afford biblical Christian education without government entanglement, and primarily looking at private scholarship programs and things that would help financially without entangling us. And we're not going to be a voucher group, but there are some programs out there that would not entangle Christian schools and be a danger to them. So we're going to be looking at these are the 6 general objectives. All right, so let's talk a little bit then now about Foundation for American Christian Education. Dr. Max Lyons is on, and Max, tell us who you are and a little bit of the history of FACE, and I'm going to put some kudos in when I get a chance. All right, we're welcome to Dr. Max Lyons, and he's here representing Foundation for American Christian Education. He's one of our founding members, and frankly, FACE is one of the, we have 18 members, but they're one of the larger, more substantial groups that have been around a long time and have a good history. Max?
Well, thank you, Ray. Max Lyons here. As Ray said, I'm the Director of Teaching Services for the Foundation for American Christian Education. Our president is Dr. Carol Adams, and she and I, all of us are very excited to be part of this new Christian Education Initiative. FACE has been working in the area of Christian education now for 55 years. We just not too long ago had our 50th anniversary. And we actually go back to our founders started working in the 1940s, Verna Hall and Rosalie Slater. So this work has been going on a long time. I've been involved in it with it myself for 40 years now. So we are, again, we're very excited to be part of a united effort. We see FACE's involvement in this alliance, or this initiative, is critical to our mission, because we believe that, as the mission statement says, all 18 of our organizations, and there's probably more that could be added. I know there are more that could be added. We all have this goal of seeing more children out of the government system into Christian education. We all believe in that, and we all, each one of our organizations have a different aspect as far as supporting Christian education or supporting homeschoolers, or being involved in some way in Christian education. And FACE certainly has a unique contribution, which we can talk about more. But we're just happy to be a part of an effort that, Ray, I think that working together, one of the principles of, the 7 principles of the principle approach is the principle of unity and union. And, the Bible talks about how 2 or 3 can do more than, one working by themselves. And there's power in unity. And Carol and I and us at FACE, I can assure you, we're very excited about the unity that we have as an organization and how we can each contribute to this important mission.
Okay, Max, we're going to come back to you, so don't go away. We're going to spend a good bit of time discussing FACE this morning, but let me put a commercial in here. My wife and I were in Indiana in the 70s, and I was finishing up my seminary training at Grace Seminary in Winona Lake. And we actually started in that period of the mid 70s, started our homeschooling experience. And in those days, there was hardly any curriculum. I mean, Becca, Bob Jones, Alpha, Omega, all these groups didn't exist as far as curriculum for homeschoolers. And we had to kind of patch a plan together. My wife is actually an educator and taught for years in a Christian school, so she had background. And so we came across the FACE, Foundation for American Christian Education books, and we just call them the Big Red Books. And they were actually tools in our homeschool experience. And we got to know Ruth Smith, who works, it is a extension, a part of your national apparatus, and had her for a conference in Indiana in the mid 70s. And we were kind of introduced to your program, Max, way back. And we used the books in our homeschool experience. And I've always described FACE as the gold standard for Christian education. There are a lot of really good groups out there that do a good job, and we may at some point feature some of the others, but this is really one of the stronger, more substantive and content-centered programs. And I like it because it looks at some of the unique Christian heritage experiences in the American model. In other words, we had a Christian heritage in our founding era, and FACE looks at that and incorporates that into their program. Let's put up their webpage, Jared, and we're going to get Max to comment on it. Okay, this is a webpage for Foundation for American Christian Education, and I urge you to go there and study it. They have so much to offer for homeschool families and for Christian day schools. Talk a little bit about some of the programs, Max, and we're going to ask you some questions.
Well, as you can, you've already touched on something that is very near and dear to our heart, and that is teaching what is some refer to as Christian history. We often refer to it as providential history. The foundation actually started with a study or a rediscovery of providential history by our founder, Verna Hall, who started researching in the 1940s. Believe it or not, back then her motivation was understanding why we're moving away from capitalism and liberty and free enterprise into socialism. So that problem is not a new problem. Verna actually started her study of history and government and law and economics with that in mind, trying to figure out why we were moving away from the principles of liberty from our founding period to principles of bondage and collectivism and the welfare state. So she was very perceptive. Verna Hall, seeing this back in the 1940s, she was actually working with FDR, if you can believe that, in the implementation of the New Deal. And her own personal experience was she started seeing that the thinking of the American people change into this entitlement mentality. So Verna rediscovered, if you will, the Christian history of our nation. It had been there all along, but it had been lost. It was no longer taught in the schools, no longer believed by a number of Americans because they were not taught it anymore. So that is a big part of our program. If you are interested in that, want to learn more about, you feel like you've learned history the wrong way or don't understand a providential view of history or a Christian view of history, we have all kinds of resources in terms of print material, videos, free material. There's all kinds of things. You can explore that on our website. If you see the button up there on the top right that says shop, that will take you into our bookstore. And we have currently have about 200 products that not only teach providential history, but most of them are education related, K through 12 education materials, as well as adult education materials. So the other thing to say about FACE, Ray, is that we are a major international Christian education organization that teaches a philosophy of education known as the principle approach. And I can't explain that in just a couple words, that which takes hours to explain. But the short version of it is it's principle, PLE, where we go back and study every subject from the standpoint, first of all, of the biblical principles that govern that subject, but then the principles of each subject. Every subject has its biblical principles and its governing principles, whether it's history, science, mathematics, geography. Every area of knowledge or truth has its principles, and frankly, we used to teach this way. The first couple hundred years of education in our country was a principled approach. It didn't look exactly like we've codified it today, but it was our founders were shaped by this principled method of teaching and learning. So we break all that out. We explain it all. We have programs to teach it, Ray, to homeschoolers as well as teachers in Christian schools. We have a whole master teacher training program where you can learn this methodology from the ground up. And then we have the curriculum to support it. We've spent 40 years developing curriculum and hiring writers to codify this approach. So we have the methodology, the philosophy, the methodology, and the curriculum to support it. That kind of in a nutshell is what FACE has.
They are more substantive and they do research. They encourage the students look in original sources and do research. So much of the education, even in our Christian schools today, is very light, superficial. I'm not saying it's wrong to use true false answers in a way of training children, but it's not the deepest way, or just check a box or something. And so much of what goes on even in Christian education doesn't teach the children really how to think, as Max has just said, from a principle, a point of view. And so we know that a lot of the children that go through these schools, and they come out really just light years ahead of their peers and other Christian schools. And again, I'm thankful for Christian education wherever it may be. And all Christian schools are equal, as George Orwell said about people. All people are equal, but some are more equal than others. And this is really a gold standard of Christian education methodology. And they've got a history. This is not something they just kind of blew up one day and, was here. We found out about them, last year. They've been around since the 40s. There's been effort to dig this out and deepen it. And now Dr. Carol Adams, who's our friend, and Max Lyons are leading the effort there. Y'all are based in Chesapeake, Virginia, which is in the Virginia Beach area. They have a number of schools. The model school is Stonebridge. Tell us a little bit about that, Max. I know your children probably went there. You might even taught there at one time.
Yes, sir. I did. I was just actually thinking about that this is not just a pie in the sky or philosophy for me, Ray. My wife and I got involved in principal approach education back in the late 80s, and I actually came to work for Dr. Adams and Stonebridge School in 1988, where I served for 19 years as the teacher and administrator. And yes, 3 of my 4 children are graduates of Stonebridge School, and my wife and I feel incredibly blessed that we lived here next to such an incredible educational institution, and we're able to personally benefit from it. And I agree with what you said, Ray. I support Christian education anywhere that I see it, anywhere I come in contact with it. But I believe that they're good, better, and best. And I believe with all my heart, not just because I work at FACE, but because I've experienced it and I've seen its impact in the lives of hundreds and probably thousands of families and children over my 19 years at Stonebridge School. Of really, biblically, I think the strongest method of education, as well as academically. You're absolutely right, Ray. Using primary sources and teaching students how to think and reason from biblical principles is superior to textbook and workbook learning, which I did wholeheartedly in many years before I came across the principle approach. So Stonebridge School started in 1980, so it's about to celebrate its 40th anniversary. There are, by the way, 6 schools that started about the same time that Stonebridge School started. So we have 6 demonstration schools across the country. We have a number of other schools that are more recent and more fledgling, but we have 6 demonstration schools, and we have a goal over the next 5 years, Ray, of bringing about many more demonstration schools. We'd like to have one in every state as a model or an example as we begin to grow this movement. So that is part of our 5-year plan to grow not only the number of schools, but we have a number of, as you know, homeschooling is big across our country, and we have a number of principal approach homeschool hybrids where the students are in school for a day or 2 a week, and then the parents are following up on the teacher's lesson plan for the other 2 or 3 days. So we're not just involved in K through 12, full schools, but we're also heavily involved in homeschooling as well. And then we have a number of, in addition to the homeschool hybrids, we have a number of just homeschoolers that we work with, that we train, that we hold their hand through the use of this, our products and the methodology. And, there's almost not a day goes by here at FACE that a homeschooler doesn't call us, and we work with them, or maybe they're new and we have to explain the principal approach to them. And I think going back to Stonebridge School, it is a model that people, if they're interested in seeing, or if there's one closer to them, there's one in Plymouth, there's one in Pennsylvania, there's one out in Oklahoma, there's one in Texas. So there may be a demonstration school closer to you that you would like to go and visit. But I think that's one of the best ways to learn about the principal approach, quite frankly. It's not hear about it, read about it, but go and see it. See
it's
it in
very
action.
good. And I lived in Virginia Beach for a time, and of course our kids at that point were being homeschooled, and we were just finding out about Stonebridge in the mid 80s, and it was new school. And of course I learned a lot more about them since then. We moved back to South Carolina in 85. But the advantage of it is you could go take 3 or 4 days as a couple or a group. Say you wanted to start a Christian school in your area, and they can help you with that. And I'm gonna ask Max about that in a minute. But you could bring your team, a potential board group, say a pastor and 3 or 4 business people who want to start a Christian school in Timbuktu or somewhere, and you could go to Stonebridge and spend a week there getting kind of equipped, because we can talk to you and tell you about it, but you have to see it. You have to experience it. And there's so many models out there, and some of them are very superficial. And again, we're going to be praising and hoping that any kind of Christian education, even a weak model, is better than public, secular, pagan education. But if you can do the best, you should try to do it. And so we hardly recommend them as a place to go and study it. Now, they have tools, and Max is a writer, by the way. He's not just an educator, but he's written some pretty helpful books. Max, give us a couple of samples, and I know you've had a little pamphlet on Arguing for Christian Education, which we've used. Tell us about that one, and then I want you to talk about the manual you have on how to start a Christian school.
Well, I saw we just went to the shop button, and that's the first thing to say is that these books are all available through FACE on our website. And the first book that you referenced is called Sons and Daughters Walking in the Truth, Ray. And in that one, it's very short, I think about 16 pages. I have laid down the biblical reasons for Christian education, biblical and also constitutional free market reasons for Christian education. So it's just a short little apologetic, letting people know that we're not just, putting down the government schools and saying, get your kids out of there, it's bad, but there are positive biblical reasons for Christian education. Actually, if you take a careful look at the scriptures, I think you could certainly make the case that Christian education is a mandate from God. Fathers and mothers are mandated to train their children up, disciple their children in the ways of God. And you can only do that through biblical Christian education. So that's the first little booklet. The second one that you referenced is my book on, basically it's how to start and maintain and run an excellent Christian school. Now, it is based on my experience at Stonebridge School, so you'll see it has the principal approach slant to it, but it would be useful for anyone, not necessarily, you wouldn't necessarily have to have a principal approach school to benefit from that book. Title of that book is How to Establish a Christian School to Restore the Republic. Long title.
can we put that up just so you can see it? And we've recommended this book with Exodus Mandate. And I think now that we have the alliance, the initiative going, we sometimes throw the word coalition or alliance around, but now that that's operational, we've got 18 members, and I think we're going to focus on some of our members who are doing really, really good work, and we're going to kind of try to push them along. And I think we're going to see more of our members getting behind this FACE, Foundation for American Christian Education, because one of our goals in the Christian Education Initiative, launched on March 13, is that we're going to try to really grow Christian education nationwide and maybe worldwide. We've already discussed reaching overseas, and I'm going to mention something about FACE in a minute in that regard. But we see Christian education as the norm, the biblical norm for all Christians, for all times and all situations. All right, let's look at the book. Do we see it there? Your book.
Ray, this may be a good teachable moment on using our website. I always recommend people go up into the search bar, go into shop, and then go into that search bar up at the top right-hand corner. And if you start typing how to establish, I think it will pop up. Okay. There you go.
There it is.
I even do that on my own website because it's sometimes hard to find things.
Okay. So this is a book that you can use. And, because we're seeing and discovering in the last 3 or 4 years that people are calling us all the time in Exodus Mandate. How do we get started? And this is something we hardly recommend. And Max is the author. And it's not just something he's theoretically done. He's experienced this. He has tested this arguments in this book, and it's worked. So he's going to give you both theory and practice. And this is a book that you could use to start a Christian school. And maybe you know somebody that wants to start one. We right now are talking to some people in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And this is a friend of FACE who has been kind of on the fringe of FACE, but she's a businesswoman in Chattanooga, and she's going to be trying to get a Foundation for American Christian Education school started in Chattanooga in the next several years, or maybe sooner. So we know of situations like this right now. So Max, as you can look at this webpage, you can see that this group, they've been around a while, and there is a body of work that's substantial and strikingly wonderful. It's not just 2 or 3 little books that they've written, but they've got a huge body of work. Let's go back to the big red books. I want you to see what Gail and I used in our homeschool experience in the 1970s. I saw you had those up a minute ago. The big red books, we call them. There they are. These are things that we actually used in the 70s. And so these are not new books. They've been around 40 or 50 years. The big red books, we call them. And introduced to us by Ruth Smith, who's part of their network.
Ray, could I say something? Going back to my book on how to establish a Christian school, we have homeschool hybrids that have bought and used that book too. So it's not just it's not just for a full K through 12 school. The other thing I want to say is FACE actually has, if you will, a school planting package. This is only one component of that. So we actually can help you through the generosity of Stonebridge School. We can supply you with all the manuals that you need, your board manual, your teacher's manual, and these are samples. You could take them, they're in a Word document. You could take it and modify it and customize it for your school. We literally have all the components that you need to operate your Christian school. So it's sort of like a franchise. It's not really a franchise. We don't have that kind of relationship with anyone, but we will supply you with at no cost. I mean, the books cost, but other than that, there's no charge for all these materials.
Let me make a comment real quick here before we get away from it. They have a pretty strong outreach in the nation of Brazil, and Roberto Rinaldi, who is also has based in America. I think he's in Orlando. Did I get the name right there?
Yes, you did.
Yeah. And he's leading a group in Brazil, and they have 150 faith or principle approach Christian schools in the nation of Brazil, which is pretty amazing. Let's go back to the news release a minute. I want to say something about the quality. Put the news release up again. Go to the first page. Okay, scroll down. All right, right here. Dan Smithwick. Dan Smithwick, president of the Nehemiah Institute, is one of our Christian Education Initiative members, and really my oldest, longest friend in the Exodus Mandate movement. He started the Nehemiah Institute, I think, in the mid-'80s, and he created the Peers test, which was Christian children in various venues, Christian schools, homeschools, and even public schools, in terms of their worldview. Do they hold to a strong Christian worldview? And he's been, I think he's tested 100,000 children, evangelical Christian children, since the late 80s. And frankly, the results are appalling. Most of our evangelical Christian children who are public schools score way in the low teens on their worldview. They do not hold any kind of a Christian worldview. And Peers stands for politics, education, economics, religion, and social issues. And if the Christian children in public school have any kind of a worldview, it's only barely in the area of religion. They may hold to some theological doctrine of the church, but they do not hold a Christian worldview in any of these other areas. And some of the Christian schools, the standard Christian schools that use secular curriculum, do pretty poorly on this test as well. But I'm happy to report to you that FACE, a principal approach, they score highest on Dan Smithwick's worldview Peers test than any other model. And then right behind them is what we call the classical Christian schools. They do pretty well as well. But the standard ACSI and some of the other Christian school models sometimes can do pretty poorly. So, and I think we would say that the FACE is a classical model as well, but they focus on America's unique Christian experience, the classical model of the founding era, that we were founded as a Christian nation, both the Jamestown experience in 1607 and particularly looking at the Plymouth founding in 1620. Whereas a lot of the classical models look at the medieval experience, going back to the Middle Ages, because there were many good Christian aspects in that era as well. But FACE, and this is why one reason I sort of prefer them, is that they focus on what was unique about the American founding period. And Smithwick, who we'll probably interview at some point, is a good friend of both Exodus Mandate and FACE, has documented unequivocally that the FACE model or the principal approach schools score highest. And their children graduate from Stonebridge and other schools, and they get into any university. I've been very close to Bobby Ames down in Montgomery, Alabama for years, and her graduates, a small Christian school, a faith school, they get in all the top universities. Many of them get scholarships. So the problem with the FACE and the principal approach is not enough. We've got to grow this model. We've got to get more of these kind. If we can produce more children like that are coming out of Stonebridge, it can change our country. Okay, let's see. I don't want to lose complete control of the time here. Max, is there anything else you want to bring in?
Well, I just two things on what you just said. If you're not familiar with Dan Smithwick and the work of the Nehemiah Institute, it really is very important for the body of Christ and for Christian education and for the church. So I would really encourage you to go over to his website. And he also has some excellent training materials that could be used in Christian schools, to train teachers, that could be used in churches, in Sunday school classes, where you can study biblical worldview yourself, these areas of the peers, the politics, education, economics, religious issues, and social issues. He's recently produced a course called the Worldview Course, some colleagues of his, and it's a video-based course that I just did it. I have a adult Sunday school class that I teach at my church, and we went through this course recently, and it was excellent. So that is a great tool that we all can use to educate, not only our children, but ourselves and our people in our church on biblical worldview.
Yeah, we're going to probably have a special program with him at some point.
That's great.
We have some